Good morning, my lovely humans. Today we are going to work on English lesson 3.2, which is going to be focusing on Anne Sullivan, her past. And so we're going to be using both the Miracle Worker and a nonfiction article. So the things that you're going to need out today, you're going to need out the Miracle Worker, you're going to need out pencil and paper. I have gone ahead and put the article inside this PowerPoint presentation so that you don't have to flip back and forth and back and forth. But I highly recommend having out that pencil and paper because I'm going to be helping you, hint, hint, with some of the questions that you might see on your exit ticket. All right, so here's the agenda for today. We're going to review what FLASHBACK is. We're going to read a nonfiction article together. We're going to do a read aloud in the Miracle Worker. We're going to do a close read, and we're going to do an exit ticket. I know that sounds like a lot, but I promise I'm going to walk you through it piece by piece, and if you pay close attention to the video, then you will do a great job on your exit ticket. So let's look at the objectives for today. Students will be able to analyze the purpose of flashbacks to Annie's brother and what it reveals about Anne Sullivan's character. And then students will be able to analyze nonfiction and compare it to the Miracle Worker. At the end of today, you're going to be doing an exit ticket. And again, like I said, if you pay close attention to the video, it will help you with today's exit ticket. That exit ticket is going to look like this. So you're going to reread the paragraph that starts with rats at the bottom of page 68. You're going to use both the article and the Miracle Worker to explain how Annie's childhood impacts her desire to teach Helen. So we're going to talk more about that as we go on, so don't stress right now if you don't know what that means. That's okay. So let's talk about what we already know. Let's activate some of that prior knowledge. So let's pause and think. Can you think of an experience from earlier on in your life that makes you the person you are today? I'm going to share mine, and then I'm going to ask that you pause and write one of your own. So in middle school, I was bullied by my classmates a lot. This is a picture of me from that time. I, as you can see, was a little awkward. But aren't we all in middle school a little bit, right? This is something that I've shared with some of you as it's come up throughout the year, but it was a really difficult experience. I had my stuff vandalized. Kids would like throw my backpack in the sink and turn the water on, and it ruined all of my assignments. It ruined all my stuff. They'd turn the lights out on me in the bathroom, etc. And it was to the point where I would come home crying to my mom every day, and I'd be like, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school. School is the worst. And it wasn't my classes that were bad. It was dealing with the people around me. And so as I got older and I started to think about what I wanted to do with my life, it really made me want to be a teacher, and specifically a middle school teacher, because middle school is rough for everyone, okay? It is a really difficult time in a young person's life. And so if I can be there for someone who's dealing with something similar, or just be there for someone who's struggling, then that's what I wanted to do. And a lot of you have shared struggles with me throughout the year, and you know, I hope you continue to do that even though we're not meeting in person. So that is something that happened in my life that kind of shaped who I am as a person today. So what I want you to do right now is pause this video, and on your piece of paper, I want you to write down something that happened to you that shaped who you are today. I am going to give you bonus points if you send this to me in the chat. Okay, so if you type out yours and send it to me in the chat, I will give you bonus points on this assignment. So go ahead and do that now. All right, what is a flashback? A flashback is a scene in a novel that goes back to an earlier event. It interrupts the chronological sequence of the text. Now remember, chronological means in order, so first, second, third, next, last, right? But a flashback is like putting pause, and then you go back in time and see something that happened to that character previously. So why do authors include them? It gives insight to a character's past motivation, or a character's past and what their motivation is now, and it provides background information on a conflict. So just like in my example, the experiences that I had in middle school made me really want to be a middle school teacher. And we're going to see some of Anne Sullivan's experiences in the book, and how those impacted her and what she wanted to do with her life. And I know you have some of those experiences too. The things that have happened to you in the past, whether they be good or bad, can shape the person you are. So how do I know I found a flashback? So flashbacks can be a little confusing because all of a sudden you're like, wait, what? Where are we? What's happening? Okay, but be on the lookout for them. You might see different characters out of nowhere. You might see a change in setting. And when you see those things, those are a clue that this might be a flashback. So if it's confusing, reread that part, okay? That's what I always say. There are some books that I read today that I have to stop and be like, I need to reread that part. That's okay. We all as readers need to do that. And that's not a sign that you're a bad reader. It's a sign that you're a really strong reader because you're willing to go back and read it again. So look for those clues as you're reading, and I bet you'll notice some flashbacks. We also saw flashbacks in several of the books that we've read this year. The Outsiders had several flashbacks, and The Watsons Go to Birmingham also had flashbacks. So before we get into The Miracle Worker, we are actually going to read a nonfiction article about the real Anne Sullivan. Because remember, this play is based on real people. Helen Keller was a real person. Anne Sullivan was a real person. Captain Keller, Mrs. Keller, they all were real people. Okay, so we're going to read about the real Anne Sullivan. Anne Sullivan's birthday is coming up this week on April 14th. So you might actually be doing this assignment on her actual birthday. How cool is that? So happy birthday, Anne Sullivan. She is not still alive, but that's okay. We can still wish her a happy birthday. So this article is called 8 Things You Probably Don't Know About Anne Sullivan. Now maybe you do, and that's awesome, but you might not. So how is this text structured? Text structure is something that we as a class tend to struggle with. So 8 things, and I notice that I have a number 1 here. So I think this article is going to list the 8 things and have maybe a paragraph or 2 about each of those 8 things that I maybe don't know about Anne Sullivan. So let's read this together, and I'm going to pause as we read, and I'm going to think aloud to myself about maybe some of the things that we should pay attention to. Okay, so I'm going to start at the beginning. Anne Sullivan is one of the Perkins School for the Blind best-known students. After graduating from Perkins in 1886, she traveled to Alabama to educate Helen Keller and remained Keller's instructor, interpreter, and friend until her death in 1936. Here are 10 things you may not know about Sullivan. Now, this is a mistake here because I know up here that there are only 8 things. So I'm going to take my little pen and I'm going to cross out this 10 and I'm going to write a little 8. Now it's difficult to write on the computer, so forgive my bad handwriting. So let's dive in to the first one. Sullivan had a childhood of extreme poverty. Now what does poverty mean? Poverty, remember, means that she was poor. And we know that based on some of the scenes that we've already watched and some of the things that we've read about her. Her parents were impoverished. Now that's another word that means poor. So impoverished means the same thing as poor. Impoverished immigrants who fled the Great Famine in Ireland. A famine is when there's not enough food to feed everybody. So famine, if they escaped, that tells me that not only were they poor where they came from, but they were struggling to get enough food to eat. And if they had stayed there, they might have died because they didn't have enough food. So I'm going to start this paragraph over now that I know those two things. Sullivan had a childhood of extreme poverty. Her parents were impoverished immigrants who fled the Great Famine in Ireland. She became almost blind from a bacterial eye disease when she was 5. Her mother died when she was 8. Now that's really sad. I'm going to have to remember that. And her father abandoned Sullivan and her brother. Abandoned means like he left them. So her mother died, and then her father was like, see ya, right? And so she and her brother were all alone. They were sent to the Tewkesbury Almshouse. Now, we watched a video of this in class. It was an overcrowded home for the poor, where her brother died a few months later. The experience awakened in her, she wrote later, not only compassion, but a fierce indignation for the plight of poor and marginalized people. Now, that's a really tough sentence. Let's talk about what that means. It awakened in her, so it means like it inspired her, not only for compassion, or compassion means like seeing things from another person's point of view or feeling sorry for them or feeling for them, but a fierce indignation. Indignation is when you're like really angry. So it made her compassionate for those people who were having this bad experience, but she was so angry that she wanted to help other people. All right, so here I'm right. I'm looking and I'm seeing that we have a list, and each list, each of these things is a different paragraph, right? So let's read the second bullet point. Sullivan got an education because of her spunk. Now that might be an important word. What does spunk mean? I'm going to have to come back to that. In 1880, Massachusetts launched an investigation into the Tewkesbury Almshouse after reports of abuse, cruelty, and even cannibalism. Cannibalism is when humans eat other humans. Yes, I said that correctly. Humans eat other humans. Now that, I don't know if it's true or not, but wow, what a terrible place to live. When the State Board of Charities sent official Frank B. Sanborn to inspect the school, Sullivan jumped in front of him saying, Mr. Sanborn, I want to go to school. She was sent to the Perkins School for the Blind. We saw that scene in the clip that we watched in class, so this should be familiar. Sullivan didn't fit in at Perkins. Other students looked down on her rough, lower-class ways. Her fierce determination helped her succeed academically, so meaning she made really good grades. But her quick temper, what is a quick temper? It means she gets angry a lot, and we've kind of seen that so far in the book. And willingness to break rules almost got her expelled several times. She persevered, meaning she did not give up, and graduated class as valedictorian. So valedictorian is like the #1 in the class. So she had the top grades. But if she were at Braze Oak, she'd probably be in detention a lot, right? Some of you can relate to that. But you know what? Just because you get in trouble in 6th grade does not mean that you're not a good person, and it doesn't mean that you can't be successful, right? She obviously learned from her mistakes, and some of those things, like her perseverance and willingness to give up, made her who she was and made her able to teach Helen. All right, so we've gotten through paragraphs 1, 2, and 3. Let's look at 4. Sullivan remained embarrassed about her poor and unsophisticated upbringing through her life. So she was embarrassed about being poor. That's something that some of us can relate to as well. Her cousin Anastasia said about her, "A horse or a cow in the pasture has better manners." As a result, Sullivan later said, "I was extremely conscious of my crudeness, and because I felt this inferiority, I carried a chip on my shoulder." So she didn't have very good manners, and because she didn't have very good manners, like, she felt really ashamed of it and insecure. Paragraph 5. Sullivan learned fingerspelling from Laura Bridgman, a graduate of Perkins, who was the first person with deaf blindness to get a formal education. The two spent time together, and Sullivan was a student of Perkins, and Bridgman taught her how to form letters with her hands and spell out words into the palm of her hand. Sullivan used that fingerspelling method to teach Helen Keller how to communicate. So fingerspelling, I'll try to find a video of that and put it in our Teams page. But we've seen her spell into her hand. But in a normal person who's deaf, you sign up here. So my name in fingerspelling is M-S-T-O-L-S-O-N. So that's how you fingerspell Miss Tolson. My challenge to you is to learn the alphabet and take a video of yourself fingerspelling your name. I would love to see that. All right, let's keep going. We've read everything on this page, okay? So I'm gonna have to come back to this to look for text evidence later. So it's good that I've kind of highlighted these important things. All right, we've got 3 paragraphs left. We can totally do this. Mark Twain was the first person to call Sullivan a miracle worker. Now, you probably don't know who Mark Twain is, but he was a famous American author. You might read some of his stuff in high school or college, but all we need to know is that he is a famous author. And remember, an author, whoops, T-H-O-R. Again, I'm sorry, it's really hard to write on this. So Mark Twain, he was a famous author, and an author is someone who writes books or poems or other things. But he was the first person to call Sullivan a miracle worker. The famous author was annoyed that people wanted to meet Keller, but ignored her extraordinary teacher. To give Sullivan the proper credit, he described her as a miracle worker. That inspired the name of the iconic movie about Sullivan and Keller, The Miracle Worker. The Miracle Worker is the name of the play, as you know, that we're reading. So that's really interesting. All right, 2 more paragraphs left. Sullivan married John Macy in May 1905, but not until after she had turned down his proposals multiple times. She was concerned that Macy couldn't handle her fiery temper and about their difference in religion. He was Protestant and she was Catholic. The two separated in 1914, but she retained her married name, Anne Sullivan Macy. So her love life was a little difficult, we can see. And last but not least, Sullivan has been portrayed by more than 20 actresses in movies and TV shows. The most memorable performances include Anne Bancroft in The Miracle Worker, 1962, Blythe Danner and Helen Keller, The Miracle Continues, a 1984 made-for-TV movie about Keller's years at Radcliffe College, and Olivia d'Abo in a 1998 episode of the animated PBS kids show Adventures from The Book of Virtues. None of those are the film version that I'm showing you, but again, if we know that lots of different actresses have played her, lots of people know about her. Right? And if lots of people know who you are, what does that make you? Right, it makes you pretty famous. Okay, now we're going to go into some of the questions that you might see on your exit ticket that have to do with this article. So the first one asks you, find 3 pieces of text evidence that prove Anne Sullivan had a difficult childhood. Now I'm going to probably need to go back to the very beginning of the article. So we know that Anne Sullivan had a childhood of extreme poverty. What does that mean? that means she was really poor, right? And if you're really poor, that can make things pretty challenging for you. Okay, so I've given you one. Your job is to go back and find 2 more pieces of text evidence. Now, how are you going to do that? Well, I'm going to post the article in the assignment, or you can pause the video and scroll back and look at the that part of paragraph 1 again. Okay, so you need to find 2 more pieces of text evidence that prove that she had a difficult childhood. Remember, difficult means hard. So she had a rough life at the beginning. I know you're able to do this. All right, let's look at this question. It says, fact 2 says, Sullivan got an education because of her spunk. Now remember, spunk was one of those words that I highlighted and I thought maybe that I should look up. But here it's telling me that spunk means courage and determination. Let me get my highlighter out. Courage and determination. So it means she's brave, right? So how does Sullivan show her spunkiness in this section? I'm going to go back. Oh, it's not going to let me go back. So it won't let me go back, but I want you to pause the video and scroll back to that paragraph 2. And I want you to find, how does she show that she's brave? How does she show that she's determined not to give up on herself? Okay? When you answer this question, you need to answer in a complete sentence. Let me say that again. You need to answer using a complete sentence. So you could use the sentence starter, Sullivan shows her spunkiness by, right? So we have a sentence starter that can help you. Here's another question. Which line from the article supports the idea that Anne Sullivan has become a very famous historical figure? Now, a historical figure is someone who lived in the past, who did a lot of things, and who people remember. So you can see a lot of famous historical figures in the picture that I put on this slide. You can see Abraham Lincoln, Bill Gates, Martin Luther King Jr., George Washington, Muhammad Ali, Sally Ride, Tiger Woods, and a bunch of other famous people that you might have learned about or might learn about in the future. How is it? So this is asking us which lines, I'm again looking for that text evidence, shows us that she became famous. I'm going to give you a hint. You might find it in that last paragraph that we read. So again, either pull up the article on your assignment or scroll the video back and look for that text evidence that shows you that she is famous. Okay, I know you can do that. Now, Anne Sullivan was Helen Keller's teacher. So this is a part where I'm going to ask you, who's a teacher that made a difference in your life? It could be from elementary school, it could be from Braes Oaks, it could be, someone who believed in you. So this is me in high school. This is me. And this is my choir teacher, Mr. Sparks. Mr. Sparks, I was in his class for 3 years in a row, and I took choir all through high school, but he started at my school when I was in 10th grade. And he was one of those people who he would always tell us stories about his life, and he made choir so fun. I learned a lot of things from him. And, in high school I went through a pretty rough time with depression and anxiety, and he would always let me come to his room during the day. If I was feeling bad, I would eat lunch in the choir room every day to avoid the cafeteria, because the cafeteria was really loud and stressful. And so not only did he teach me about music, he taught me about not giving up on myself. He taught me so many different things that I still remember today. So I actually have this picture of the two of us framed in my house, and I just smile anytime I see it because he had such a positive influence and made a difference in my life. And, music is one of those things that I still love today. I'm still singing in a choir. In fact, I'm wearing my Houston Show Choir t-shirt today. That's a choir that I'm in right now. And so the things that he taught me, I'm still using to this day. So one of the questions that I'm going to ask you in your exit ticket is to write about a teacher who made a difference in your life. Who was that teacher? What did they do? And I might shout out some of the best ones. I might write a response to you. I might even give you some bonus points if you do a good job on this question. All right, hold on, I need some water. So now we're going to read aloud with the Miracle Worker. So open your Miracle Worker book to where we left off, page 50. In your book, if you have your book with you, it's page 59. If you're using the PDF file, it is a different page, and I'm sorry, I don't know what page number that is. But we're beginning where it says, upstairs, Annie enters her room. So if you are not using your book, but you are using your, the PDF file, oops, trying to find it on the camera. I've circled it right there. Upstairs, Annie enters her room. Those are stage directions, and that's where we're beginning. A lot of you said that you were struggling with stage directions. So make sure that you pay attention as we read to the stage directions. Now, there are lots of characters in here, but only one Miss Tolson. So I'm going to try to use different voices, but follow along with me. If you get confused, pause, reread. Okay, we can do this together. Before we start though, let's look at some key vocab for this section. So wearily. Wearily, everyone say wearily. Ready? Wearily. Wearily means lacking strength or energy. So if I do something wearily, I'm like really slow and tired. There's a picture of wearily. Zeal, a strong feeling of interest and enthusiasm that makes someone determined. I don't know if I like that picture very much, but a lot of you have zeal about certain things. Some of you have zeal about math. You love math or you love science. Whatever you're really interested in and excited about, that's what you have zeal about. Rigid, not willing to change opinion or behavior. So think about a bone. A bone is really hard. You can still break it, but you have to fall really hard. A bone is rigid. So if I am rigid, I'm not willing to change my opinion and I'm not willing to change my behavior. Elude. Elude means to escape. So we've seen in the previous scenes, Helen tries to elude or escape from both her parents and from Anne Sullivan. And last but not least, immune. Immune is a word that you might have heard in the news lately. So immune means not influenced or affected by something. So if you're immune to a disease, it means you won't get it because it won't affect your body. But we can also be immune to other people's comments, like maybe you don't like my class very much. I do my best, right? But you're not going to hurt my feelings by saying that. All right, so we're going to go through and have read aloud questions. So we're going to start on page 59, and we're going to be answering these questions as we go through. So page 59, let's start with the stage directions. Upstairs, Annie enters her room, closes the door, and stands back against it. The lights growing on her with their special color commence to fade on Kate and Helen. Then Annie goes back wearily to her suitcase and lifts it to take it towards the bed. Wearily, remember, meant really tired and exhausted. And that makes sense because remember in the previous scene, this is where we see she and Helen are fighting and she's trying to get her to use her spoon. And that was really probably pretty tiring. So that makes sense. But it knocks an object on the floor and she turns back to regard it or think about it. A new voice comes in, a cultured murmur, hesitant, as with effort of remembering a text. This soul. Annie puts the suitcase down, kneels to the object. It is the battered Perkins report, and she stands with it in her hand, letting memory try to speak. The deaf, the blind, mute woman. Annie sits on her bed and opens the book, and finding the passage brings it up an inch from her eyes to read, her face and lips following the overhead words, the voice quite factual now. So this is a flashback, because I don't know who this man is. Can nothing be done to disinter this human soul? The whole neighborhood would rush to save this woman if she were buried alive by the caving in of a pit, and labor with zeal until she were dug out. Now if there were one who has such patience as zeal, he might awaken to her a consciousness of her immortal. So she's reading this really intense text. I'm not really sure what's going on there. But then in my stage directions say, when the boy's voice comes, Annie closes her eyes in pain. So let's think. Who is the boy? Now we don't know very many boys, but we know this is the start of a flashback. So who do you think the boy is? Yes, it's Jimmy, her brother. Annie, you there? Hush. Annie, what's that noise? Annie tries not to answer. Her own voice is drawn out of her, unwilling. Just a cot, Jimmy. Remember, a cot is like a bed that you can lay on. Where are they pushing it? To the dead house. Annie, does it hurt to be dead? Annie escapes by opening her eyes. Her hand works restlessly over her cheek. She retreats into the book again. But the cracked old crones interrupt, whispering. Annie slowly lowers the book. The first crone's voice. There are schools outside, schools where they teach blind ones, worse than you, to read and write. There is schools outside where there is schools. Silence. Annie sits up with her eyes shining and her hands almost in a caress over the book. So if her eyes are shining and she's remembering these things about her past, what do we think that Annie's feeling? These feelings are making her really, really sad, right? All right, let's keep going. You ain't going to school, are you, Annie? Annie whispering, when I grow up. You ain't either, Annie. You're going to stay here and take care of me. I'm going to school when I grow up. You said we'd be together forever and ever. I'm going to school when I grow up. Little girl, I must tell you, your brother will be going on a journey soon. Annie sits rigid in silence. The boy's voice pierces it, a shriek of terror. Annie! It goes into Annie like a sword. She doubles onto it. The book falls onto the floor. It takes a racked moment to find herself and what she was engaged in here. When she sees the suitcase, she remembers and lifts it once again towards the bed, but the voices are with her as she halts with the suitcase. So Annie's getting to go to school, right? But her brother, it says that her brother's going to go on a journey. What do we know happened to her brother? Okay, we know that he died. So where is the journey that her brother's going to go on? That's something to think about. Goodbye, Annie. Write me when you learn how. Don't tell anyone you came from here. Don't tell anyone. Yeah, don't tell anyone you came from. Yeah, don't tell anyone. Don't tell any. The echoing voices fade. After a moment, Annie lays the suitcase on the bed, and the last voice comes faintly from far away. Annie, it hurts to be dead. Forever. Annie falls to her knees by the bed, stifling her mouth in it. When at last she rolls blindly away from it, her palm comes down on an open report. She opens her eyes, regards it dully, and then still on her knees takes in the print. Might awaken her to a consciousness of her immortal nature. The chance is small indeed, but with a smaller chance they would have dug desperately for her in the pit. And is life of the soul less important than that of the body? Annie gets to her feet. She drops the book on the bed, pauses over her suitcase. After a moment, she unclasps and opens it. Standing before it, she comes to her decision. She at once turns to the bureau and, taking her things out of its drawer, commences to throw them in the open suitcase. In the darkness, down left, a hand strikes a match and lights a hanging oil lamp. It is Keller's hand, and his voice accompanies it, very angry. The lights rising here before they fade on Annie show Keller and Kate inside a suggestion of a garden house with a bay window seat towards the center door at the back. Katie, I will not have it. Now you do not see when that girl after supper tonight went to look for Helen in her room. No. The child practically climbed out of her window to escape from her. What kind of teacher is she? I thought she had seen her at her worst this morning, shouting at me, but I come home to find the entire house disorganized by her. Helen won't stay 1 second in the same room, won't come to the table with her, won't let herself be bathed or undressed or put to bed by her, or even Viney now. And the end result is that you have to do more for the child than before we hired this girl's services. From the moment she stepped off the train, she's been nothing but a burden, incompetent, impertinent, ineffectual, immodest. She folded her napkin, Captain. What? Not ineffectual. Helen did fold her napkin. What in heaven's name is so extraordinary about folding a napkin? Well, it's more than you did, Captain. Katie, I did not bring you all the way out here to the garden house to be frivolous. Now, how does Miss Sullivan propose to teach a deaf-blind pupil who won't even let her touch her? I don't know. The fact is, today she scuttled any chance she ever had of getting along with the child. If you can see any point or purpose to having her stay on any longer, it's more than... What do you wish me to do? I want you to give her notice. I can't. Then if you won't, I must. I simply will not. All right, so let's talk about some of these things. What is Keller's problem with Annie? Well, first of all, he's really angry, right? And he makes a fair point. Like, if Helen won't stay in the room with Annie, Annie's going to have a really hard time teaching her, right? Like, if you guys are in my class and you're not willing to even come in the door, it's going to be really hard for me to teach you. Or in an online school, if you don't watch the videos, it's going to be really hard for you to do well on the assignments. He says he wants to dismiss her. That's like fancy language for like he wants her fired. He wants to send her back. Okay, so we're going to keep reading. We're going to start with the stage directions on page 63. He is interrupted by a knock at the back door. Keller, after a glance at Kate, moves to open the door. Annie, in her smoked glasses, is standing outside. Keller contemplates her heavily. Miss Sullivan. Captain Keller. She is nervous, keyed up to be seizing the bull by the horns again, and she assumes a cheeriness which is not unshaky. Bonnie said I'd find you both over here in the garden house. I thought we should have a talk. Yes, Well, come in. Annie enters and is interested in this room. She rounds on her heel, anxiously studying it. Keller turns to the matter over to Katie. Katie. Captain. Keller clears his throat, makes ready. I wanted to first make my position clear to Miss Keller in private. I have decided I'm not satisfied. In fact, I am deeply dissatisfied with the manner in which... Excuse me, is this little house ever in use? In the hunting season. If you will give me your attention, Miss Sullivan. Annie turns her smoked glasses upon him. They hold his unwilling stare. I have tried to make allowances for you because you come from a part of the country where people are... Women, I should say, come from who... Well, for whom it begins to elude him. Allowances must be made. I have decided, nevertheless, that is, Miss Sullivan, I find it difficult to talk through those glasses. Annie? Oh, of course. So she takes off her glasses. Why do you wear them? The sun has been down for an hour. Any kind of light hurts my eyes. Put them on, Miss Sullivan. I have decided to give you another chance. To do what? To remain in our employ, but on 2 conditions. I am not accustomed to rudeness in servants or women, and that is the first. If you are to stay, there must be a radical change of manner. Whose? So here she's asking him, like, are you going to be nicer to me? Or am I going to be nicer to you? I love Annie. I don't like Captain Keller. That's just my personal feelings. Yours, young lady, isn't it obvious? And the second is that you persuade me there's the slightest hope of your teaching a child who flees from you now like the plague to anyone else she can find in this house. There isn't. It's what, Miss Annie? It's hopeless here. I can't teach a child who runs away. Then, do I understand you propose? Well, if we all agree it's hopeless, the next question is what? Miss Annie. She's leaning toward Annie, deadly earnest, in command of both Annie and Keller. So this question asks us, what did Keller decide? So he decided here that he wasn't going to fire Annie after all, because Helen was able to learn to fold her napkin. Did this surprise you or not? I'm curious to see your thoughts. I am not agreed. I think perhaps you underestimate Helen. I think everybody else here does. She did fold her napkin. She learned. Do you know she began talking when she was only 6 months old? She could say water. Not really. Wawa. Wawa, but she meant water, and we knew exactly what she meant at only 6 months old. I never saw a child so bright or outgoing. Her voice is unsteady, but she gets it level. It's still in her somewhere, isn't it? You should have seen her before her illness. Such a good-tempered child. She's changed. A pause. Kate not letting her eyes go. Her appeal at last is unconditional and very quiet. Miss Annie, put up with it and with us. Us? Please? Like the lost lamb in the parable, I love her all the more. Mrs. Keller, I don't think Helen's worst handicap is deafness or blindness. I think it's your love and pity. Now, what does that mean? All of you here are so sorry for her. You've kept her like a pet. Why, even a dog you housebreak. No wonder she won't let me come near her. It's useless for me to try to teach her a language or anything else here. I might as well. Miss Annie, before you came, we spoke of putting her in an asylum. Sorry. Blaze, my kitty, wants to be in the lesson too. Annie turns back to regard her. A pause. What kind of asylum? For mental defectives. I visited there. I can't tell you what I saw. People like animals with rats in the halls, and she shakes her head on her vision. What else are we going to do if you give up? Give up? You said it was hopeless. Here, give up. Why, I only saw today what has to be done to begin. She glances from Kate to Keller, who stare, waiting, and she makes it as plain and as simple as her nervousness permits. I want complete charge of her. That means she wants Helen to live with her. She wants to be like the only person that Helen has. You already have it. It has resulted in, no, I mean day and night. She has to be dependent on me. For what? Everything. The food she eats, the clothes she wears, fresh. She is amused at herself, though very serious. Air. Yes, she breathes. Whatever her body needs is a primer to teach her out of. It's the only way. The one who lets her have it should be her teacher. She considers them in turn. They digested. Keller frowning, Kate perplexed. Not anyone who loves her. You have so many feelings, they fall over each other like feet. You won't use your chances, and you won't let me. But if she runs from you to us, Yes, that is the point. I'll have to live with her somewhere else. What? Till she learns to depend on and listen to me. For how long? As long as it takes. I packed half my things already. Miss Sullivan. But when Annie attends upon him, he is speechless, and she is merely earnest. Captain Keller, it meets both your conditions. It is the one way I can get back in touch with Helen, and I don't see how I can be rude to you again if you're not around to interfere with me. And what is your intention if I say no? Pack the other half for home, abandon your charge to the asylum? She waits, appraises Keller's glare and Kate's uncertainty, and decides to use her weapons. I grew up in such an asylum, the state almshouse. Kate's head comes up and Keller stares hard. Annie's tone is cheerful enough, albeit level as gunfire. Rats. Why, my brother Jimmy and I used to play with the rats because we didn't have toys. Maybe you'd like to know what Helen will find there, not on visiting days. One ward was full of the old women, crippled, blind, most of them dying. But even if what they had was catching, there was nowhere else to move them, and that's where they put us. There were younger ones across the hall, prostitutes mostly with TB and epileptic fits, and a couple of the kind who keep after the older girls, especially young ones, and some insane. Some just had the DTs. The youngest were in another ward to have babies they didn't want, and started at 13 and 14. They'd leave afterwards, but the babies stayed, and we played with them too, though a lot of them had sores all over from diseases you're not supposed to talk about. But not many of them lived. The first year we had 80, 70 died. The room Jimmy and I played in was the dead house, where they kept the dead bodies until they could dig. Oh, my dear. The graves. She is immune to Kate's compassion. No, it made me strong, but I don't think you need to send Helen there. She's strong enough. She waits again, but when neither offers her word, she simply concludes, I have no conditions, Captain Keller. Miss Annie? Yes. Where would you take Helen? Oh, Italy? What? Well, you can't have everything. How would this garden house do? Furnish it, bring Helen here after a long ride so she won't recognize it, and you can see her every day. If she doesn't know, well, is that all? That is all. Captain, with your permission? Why must she depend on you for the food she eats? I want control of it. Why? As a way to reach her. You intend to starve her into letting you touch her? She won't starve, she'll learn. All's fair in love and war, Captain Keller. You never cut supplies? This is hardly a war. Well, it's not love. A siege is a siege. Miss Sullivan, do you like the child? Do you? Sorry, I lost my place. A long pause. You could have a servant here. I'll have enough work without looking after a servant. But that boy, Percy, could sleep here and run errands. We can let Percy sleep here, I think, Captain. And some old furniture, all our own. Captain, do you think the walnut bedstead in the barn would do? I have not yet consented to Percy, or to the house, or to the proposal, or to Miss Sullivan staying on when I... But he erupts in an irate surrender. Very well, I consent to everything. He shakes the cigar at Annie. For 2 weeks. I'll give you 2 weeks in this place, and it will be a miracle if you get the child to even tolerate you. 2 weeks? Miss Annie, can you accomplish anything in 2 weeks? Anything or not. 2 weeks. Then the child comes back to us. Make up your mind, Miss Sullivan. Yes or no. She nods at him nervously. I'll get her to tolerate me. Keller marches out and slams the door. Kate, on her feet, regards Annie, who is facing the door. You can't think as little of love as you said. Annie glances, questioning. Or you wouldn't stay. I didn't come here for love. I came for the money. Kate shakes her head to this with a smile. After a moment, she extends her open hand. Annie looks at it, but when she puts hers out, it is not to shake hands. It is to set her fist in Kate's palm. A. So she puts her hands out to shake her hand, and instead of shaking her hand, Annie puts the letter A in her palm. A. It's the first of many, 26. Kate squeezes her fist, squeezes it hard, and hastens out after Keller. Annie stands as the door closes behind her, manner so apprehensive that she finally slaps her brow and holds it, sighs, and with her eyes closed, crosses herself for luck. So what does Annie want to be successful? Remember, she said she needs Helen and she needs to be in charge of her fully and away from their parents. And what does Annie want the Kellers to do? Remember, the Kellers can't interact with her. So they can see her, but Helen can't know that the Kellers are there. All right. So we're going to go into the close reading. So remember, the voice was Jimmy. And conflict, what does conflict mean? Conflict is a problem. So what is the conflict or problem that Annie has with Jimmy? So think about what does Kate want to do that Jimmy doesn't want her to do, right? And what does Jimmy say? Okay, what does the doctor mean when he says that Annie's brother is going on a journey soon? Okay, remember, what happens to Annie's brother, Jimmy? Think about what happens to him and think about what that could mean, right? I'm not telling you the answers to this because I need you to use your brains on this, but I'm giving you some hints. And so then remember, in the text it says it goes into Annie like a sword. So what does it reveal about her memories of Jimmy? So how does thinking about Jimmy and these memories make Annie feel? So what you're going to do during your exit ticket, you're going to be writing a paragraph. Yes, a paragraph. I know you can do it. You're going to reread the paragraph that starts with rats on page 68. You're going to use the article and the book to explain how Annie's childhood impacts her desire to teach Helen. So just like my middle school experiences impact my desire to teach you guys, Annie's childhood impacts her desire to teach Helen. So you're going to need a thesis statement. You're going to need one piece of evidence from the article, one piece of evidence from the play, and several sentences explaining your answer, how your evidence connects to your thesis. To help you, I've given you some sentence starters. So this one you could use as your thesis. Annie's childhood impacts her desire to teach Helen because. For example, in the article it says, blank, this detail illustrates. So then you would explain how the information from the article what that shows you. In addition, in the play, so this is how you could introduce information in the play. The reader can conclude. So again, we're going to connect this. And then you need at least one more connection sentence. Annie wants to teach Helen because. Now, do you have to use these sentence starters? No, of course not. You can use your own if you want. But these are things that are going to help you. If I were you, as I'm writing my paragraph, I would actually pause the video on this and then scroll back, flip back and forth, and that should really help you. All right, now it's time to do your exit ticket. I know this video was pretty long. However, I know that if you've watched it to this point, you're gonna do a good job on your exit ticket. So the output is just what we talked about. Reread the paragraph that starts with rats, and then the article, and explain how Annie's childhood impacts her desire to teach Helen. So here's the paragraph together. Rats. Why my brother Jimmy and I used to play with the rats because we didn't have toys. Maybe you'd like to know what Helen will find there not on visiting days. One ward was full of old women, crippled, blind, most of them dying. But even if what they had was catching, there was nowhere else to move them. That's where they put us. There were younger ones across the hall, prostitutes, mostly with TB, epileptic fits, and a couple of the kind who kept girls, especially young ones, some insane. Some had the DTs. The youngest were in another ward to have babies, and they didn't want, and they started at 13 or 14. They leave afterwards, but the babies stay, and we played with them too, though a lot of them had sores all over from diseases you weren't supposed to talk about. But not many of them lived. The first year we had 80, 70 died. The room Jimmy and I played in was the dead house where they kept the bodies until they could dig the graves. Okay, so this is the paragraph that we're going to need to find evidence from. Now, if you're not sure what it is, like TB is tuberculosis, that's okay if you didn't know that. Probably you're not going to want to choose that as your evidence. There's plenty of more evidence in this paragraph. Okay, so what does the paragraph teach us about the asylum? What do you know from Annie's life about the article? And you're going to combine those two ideas about why Annie wants to teach Helen. Think about, where would Helen go if Annie wasn't there? All right, so I know that was a really long video, but I also know that you persevered through this video, you listened to my voice a lot, and now you're ready to turn me off. But please remember that I love you so much. I miss you so much. I want you to have a wonderful day, and please stay healthy. And if you need help with this paragraph or anything else on the exit ticket, come to office hours. That is what I am here for. I'm gonna help you with it, okay? I love you, be good, have a wonderful day.